Thank you for joining today's Tech Talk. I'm the producer, Lance Hart. Today's episode is Cybersecurity Fatigue is Real. Is a managed security partner the answer? I'm joined by Justin Rice, Vice President of Solution Consulting, and John Lloyd, Practice Principal. Guys, let's jump right in.
All right. Thanks, Lance. As always, John, thank you for joining me today.
And as always, we accidentally dressed very similarly.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, really noticeable on camera.
Yeah, totally. Oh, man, that's funny. Okay, well, today, as Lance set it up, we're going to talk a little bit about cybersecurity fatigue.
Yep.
It's real. We're going to talk about managed security partners. We're going to talk about platformization in the cybersecurity space. I think all of those things can wind together. I read a stat this morning in preparation for this saying that most enterprises have, on average, partnerships with about 35 security vendors and consume north of 70 products. That's tiring. I know in our space, right, as a value-added reseller, as a managed services provider, I get hit up all the time by all the different OEMs talking about their best-of-breed product that fixes this particular problem. And for me, that's very tiring. I can only imagine how our customers feel. Yeah, to me, that's the definition of cybersecurity fatigue. Kind of what's your stance?
So completely agree. Volume is one thing. The other piece is, like, in the IT space, there's always somebody knocking at your door, but they tend to be known players. Like, it feels like there's a new logo, a new startup, a new tool every week. And I get these emails of like, hey, I want to get on your calendar. I want time. And it's like, I don't even know you. I don't know anything about your company. I shouldn't, am I going to go Google? Like, tell me about your company in your email. And what do you do differently? And I think that's the part of the fatigue for me is I met with 3 security vendors last week, and all 3 of them, they were SASE vendors. All started the conversation the same way. We were born in the cloud. We're cloud native. We're single pass architecture. That's what makes us unique. And it's like you all just said the exact same thing. What is your differentiator? And it feels like it's kind of a land grab right now. And that, I think, leads to the fatigue as well.
Yeah, we were talking before this around this idea that a lot of cybersecurity, the procurement of the products is really based on fear a lot of times. Like, oh my gosh, I'm really exposed. I'm really vulnerable to what is out there. I need to buy this product because it's going to solve the world's problems. When in reality, what we're starting to see from and certainly hear from our customers is, oh man, I bought these 3 products. They all 3 have some overlap in features. My cost containment is now out of control. And oh, by the way, I don't necessarily have the skills to even manage that environment. And I think people are struggling with that.
Not only struggling with the cost containment, but the lifecycle management. Whether it's patching or whether it's just when's my license up, right? The days of buying a box, right? I mean, there's always been fatigue here, right? Like, I bought Ironport for email, and I had this for my IDS IPS box, and I had it passive or I had it in line, and this was my firewall, and this was for my DDoS. So there's already been some consolidation of what I would consider branch or edge security into a box, and now that box has become the cloud, and SASE VPN concentrators moved into that box and now into the cloud. So that part, like, I used to buy 20 tools, those started to shrink. Now we're starting to see, as the attack surface has expanded, the tools are starting to expand again. And in the same way we talked about consolidation of tools into a branch security edge or a cloud security edge, I think that's what we're going to be talking today about platformization of consolidating some of those tools.
I think you're right, because the reality is you have the more as the workforce has changed and everything's in the cloud and workforce is mobile and you have to add more tools, integration challenges of those tools exist, right? The more tools you have, the harder it is to integrate. And then really from an operational standpoint, response times start to slow down. When you have to start triaging all of this information yourself without, and listen, there's tools that kind of solve some of that, but slower response times to resolving issues is certainly a factor when you have multiple tools. So let's talk about platformization a little bit. We've been conditioned over the last number of years to think, okay, I need my best in breed firewall, my best of breed email security. I need best of breed everything to really protect my environment. And we're starting to see the pendulum swing a little bit to platformization. Tell me what that means.
Yeah. So I'll use a bit of a more simple, maybe funnier analogy. You're like any 90s like cop movie where like the FBI shows up and goes, I have jurisdiction here. And then I'm the local, who's in charge? And that is it, in all seriousness, in a incident, right? Incident response, whether that is a physical bad guy movie from the 90s or your security environment. In incident response, correlation between different departments, agencies, tool sets becomes wildly important, and getting to that root cause analysis and getting to this understanding. So when you start talking about tool sprawl, when something happens, how quickly am I able to correlate the logs from my firewall, from my endpoint detection tool on my PC, from my VPN or ZTNA access, right? Like all of these different points of the attack surface, how quickly are we able to get them all working together? And that's really where platformization is coming in. There's a difference between the Me Too's and the platformization. And Me Too is what I consider every OEM that says we also do that, right? Every OEM is going to have 70 different SKUs, and they probably do 4 or 5 really well. But they needed land grab, market share, right? Think about that concept. You mentioned on the onset of the call, the average company had 35 OEM partners and 70 tools.
That's right.
That's an average of 2. How many OEMs, and for folks on the call, and I know we probably have some OEMs, I know we have some of our organization, I know we have a lot of customers and some maybe potential customers. If you have questions, let's bring them in, because I love when we have a big audience like this that we can see the numbers online. But you're not, like, your OEMs are not going, here's our 2 products. They're trying to sell you 30, they're trying to sell you 40, and the average is you're buying 2 because they probably on average do 2 very well. And so platformization is, how do we get all these things working together? How do we truly build best of breed into one platform? And some of that's through acquisition, some of it's through development, but everything from your firewall to your cloud security environment to virtual firewalls to your endpoint detection and response to ZTNA to remote browser isolation. How do we get all of these tools onto one platform, sharing data in the same language, working together to minimize the threat, making it actionable, faster to respond without sacrificing or diminishing the quality of the tool sets? That's platformization.
Yeah, we had the opportunity to meet with a few different customers earlier today and kind of talk through this topic a little bit. And kind of the general gist is like raising their hand and saying, "Uncle, listen, I need, like, enough is enough. I need to have, I need to consolidate my security functions into a single platform. I need to have a unified pane of glass that I can look at to really, monitor that platform. I really don't want my people to have to spend all of their time learning the tools. I just want them to be able to operate the tools. I want to manage my cost." Like, those are our common themes we'll continue to see, which I think, to your point, is where platformization is really coming in. And I think, even earlier this week with the Splunk Cisco deal closing, that's kind of trending that direction too, right? Is getting things together in kind of a single motion.
Yeah, so that's step 1. Step 2, and I think we had a question came in of, are you seeing fatigue of not just the number of tools, but the number of alerts?
Oh, yeah.
And I always, so first off, understand, even if you have it tuned perfectly, there's still a hierarchy, right? And so we talk about events to incidents, right? And I used it, I told, in a meeting we were in earlier today, I told some of the security folks we were talking to, events are what gets you funded and incidents are what keeps, your job. Meaning, I go to the business and I go, we had 3,000 events today. I need more
God, John,
funding.
you're doing a great job. Good job.
We had 3,000 events. I need all this funding. And then you go back to them and go, hey, on my watch, we only had 2 incidents. So it's the pat on the back. But there is fatigue about getting it right. Not all events are incidents. Not everything, what is an anomaly? What is abnormal? What is your environment? What's your employees? And so we run and operate our own SOC. So we've got a army of engineers with eyes on glass, watching for these alerts. And I think, yes, there is fatigue. Some of that fatigue can be tuned. Some of it goes away with run books from an outsourced SOC, from an MSSP. We know in our SOC, so we have some giant global customers that we have dedicated SOC built for them. We also have kind of shared services where we're able to bring SOC services down market because they are shared resources across multiple customers. We build individual run books. What happens when we get an alert? What do you want us to do? Because that fatigue is real. Even when I get down to one tool, there still can be noise in there.
Yeah, totally true. And I want to, and thank you guys for sending in the questions. We have a screen in front of us. We can see them when they come in, so please keep them coming. Before we get to the next question, though, I do want to talk about AI a little bit, because I think at some point you're going to see yes, alert fatigue is certainly real. I do think that there's a place where AI is going to help kind of tune some of that.
Yeah. And so today you start talking about if we're on a platform, it can correlate things together better. I think you're going to start seeing, with the help of AI, using AI, today a SIM tool is just a collector. I use the example that it's a junk drawer, right? You throw stuff in it. You don't really know what's always in it. And then the SOC comes in and organizes that junk drawer and prioritizes it and things like that. And I think AI certainly is not going to replace the need for a SOC, but I think it will make SIM tools a lot better. It will start to correlate from a bunch of different sources, more actionable and meaningful alerting for then your SOC to start to take. How do we get 1,000 events down to 500? Those 500 become 3 incidents, that sort of stuff. And then, by the way, when we do all of that, it's just going to reduce the cost and make SOC. There will be a day, and the day is not far away, where the same I don't care how big your business is. If IT professional walks in and says, "What's your firewall?" You're going to have an answer for it. I think we're heading that same way of who's your MSSP, what's your SOC. Now, you might not have an MSSP, you might do it in house, but a SOC is going to be the same. What a firewall was 10 years ago. Everybody will have an EDR/MDR/XD, some DR feeding into a SOC.
Well, that leads us to the next question. So someone asked, does it matter what platform is choosing? The answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
And not all platforms are created equal, right? You can do some platform consolidation or some platform-ization for a variety of the products, but not for everything. Sometimes best in breed is still going to be the best. However, I think you said this, the SOC is really the great equalizer of all of this. So
it is. Here's the thing from a platform, and this is the honest answer. Go and line up a Toyota Camry and a Porsche and ask people which one they want. Everyone's going to want the keys to the Porsche. Then you're going to hand them the price tag. And a lot of people are going to drive off the lot with a Toyota Camry, right? It's still a great car. It's a reliable car. It's not a Porsche. The same is true with any technology, any platform. Business constraints, including budget, including operability, including maybe lead time if there is hardware, maybe regional availability, maybe Great Wall of China if you're a global. There's a lot of things that go into defining a platform, and it's not just how good are they at securing bits and bytes. The other thing I would say is in this space, if you didn't like a certain platform, wait 6 months and it'll get bought by somebody else. Yeah. I mean, there's still a lot of consolidation, a lot of merging going on. I completely agree, though. People and process are far more important than the platform. Now, when you interview an MSSP or you interview a SOC partner, I would ask that question. One of the things, and this is obviously selfish because we're an MSSP, so we've got a different lens to it, but I like the separation of church and state. I don't like the OEMs being like, we also manage, right? So I'm a managed EDR, right? So I do MDR, I do my own SOC, and it's like, well, hold on. Because I also have Microsoft E5, and I got Defender out of that. Is that the right tool for me? Or what are you doing for identity access management? What other logs can I pull in? To me, OEM should make the tool, and MSSPs should bring the people in the process. That's obviously, there's probably OEMs on our call, and thank you for joining. But that's my stance on it. Is
we got to be objective.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you bring up a good point around the people, the process, the technology, because one thing that I'm seeing certainly in the platformization arena is the introduction of new products like XDR, for example. Everybody's, all of our OEM partners are certainly hot on XDR. We're seeing great adoption from XDR. Help guide me down the path of XDR versus MDR versus SIM versus SOC. Can you differentiate those for me?
Yeah. So EDR is simply, the next evolution of antivirus running on a server on a desktop, right? Mm-hmm. It's still looking for viruses. It's looking for malware. It's looking for abnormalities. It's looking for all of the kind of behavior, right? MDR is simply a professional service behind that with eyes on glass that are managing detection and response, right? And then X it's extended, but we couldn't use E because we already used that for endpoint, right? So whether it's XSOAR, XSIM, XDR, is really the extended meaning, correlating and tying together a bunch of different things. So taking these logs and putting them for eyes on glass to be able to say, okay, let's pick whatever your SIM tool is. Maybe maybe it's Microsoft Sentinel. You'd mentioned Splunk earlier. There's a lot in that space, and it's not a paid. And this isn't an infomercial unless you want to pay. Then send it to producer Lance. Advertising opportunities for our podcast, but. In all seriousness, I mean, that's where the SOC is the great equalizer, is all of these tools, whether it's because you want best of breed or you don't believe in platformization, or, I think Gartner calls out like 3 years. It should be your roadmap. 3 to 5 years is your roadmap for platformization, because of the fact that you have different tools and different license expirations and time to roll out and get all this stuff going. The SOC is the great equalizer, which is engineers sitting there watching a SIM tool, tuning alerts specific to your organization, and maybe specific to certain times or geos in your organization, tuning down those alerts to reduce the amount of events, investigating those events, identifying what are actually incidents, prioritizing those incidents, responding to those incidents, building a custom run book with you. And then there's also the incident response side, which is the next layer of the SOC. So once I've found something, what do you want me to do with it? Do you want to start working on solving the problem? Do you want me to?
Yep. Well, that's a great segue to the next question we have coming in, which is, how many different feeds can a SOC handle? 3, 4, 5? I think you kind of said that is it kind of depends on the maturity and or the governance of the SOC, right? Like some MSSP who has a SOC, or one of our partners that has a SOC, they may say only 3 feeds or whatever. It really just depends on that particular SOC.
Yeah. How much do you want to pay for data lake, right? I mean, how many syslogs do you want to take? How much can you people actionable? And I think you mentioned AI. I think that, to me, what can a SOC take? AI will change that number significantly versus people. I'm not saying people will go away. I don't want to go into a whole separate thread here, but AI will certainly make SOCs better at responding to more and more logs coming in. The question is, what are the things? What are all the different logs? Why do you have more than 5 logs? 5 sources needing to feed into to a SIM. Should you be consolidating tools?
Yeah, certainly. The next question we have in here is overlapping from an internal standpoint creates twice the work. Is there any scalable solution? I've been doing this for a decade. MSSPs become a legal issue too. Great question. So let me talk about the overlapping piece first, and I'll kind of hand it over to you. Overlapping is exactly why we're seeing the rise in platformization. Well, one of the reasons, right, is if I'm buying 3 different tools, all those 3 tools do a little bit of the same thing. It's hard for me to manage. It does create twice the work. And oh, by the way, it's costing me more. Yeah. So certainly agree that is an issue. We're seeing companies like Palo Alto, as an example. Palo Alto is doing a really good job at taking a platform approach to reduce some of that overlap and scale. As far as the legal issue, do you have any comment there?
Yeah, I hope our lawyers are watching, because I'm going to make a bunch of legal. No, in all seriousness, to me, I guess it probably depends on what you need to follow. We offer SLAs as an MSSP, right? An OEM's not going to give you SLAs. We have Now, we're not going to offer anything that says we guarantee you're never going to get breached. If you're watching this, you're going to get breached at some point, right? We have a partner I work with, and inside their organization, he said, we stopped calling it security. We call it resiliency, because we know we can't secure this. We know we can't stop it from eventually happening. We've got employees everywhere, all this. What are we doing to minimize when it happens? That the attack surface is isolated, that the impact is isolated. So, asterisk, legal definition, no MSSP is ever going to guarantee you or put financial pain behind if you get breached. If you find one that does, sign with them, and they'll probably be out of business, in a short term. Some people look at it as maybe not legal, but OEM or E&O policies, right? Cybersecurity. It's CYA as a service. It's passing the buck from me, the human being CISO, to, did you do everything possible? And we watch when these ransomware events happen, and the blame starts at the top and trickles down, and then typically trickles back up, and somebody resigns and loses their job for it, right? You blame the OEM says, we put a patch out 2 years ago. Why didn't you put it in? Why was Microsoft Server 2003 still in your network? Oh, you pass it down to the director, and somebody falls on the sword. So for me, you have a legal issue anyway. By going to, when we have hospitals that we do this for, and we go through the different security assessments, and there's questionnaires with 3,000 questions, and we have to turn in all this documentation. We get audited yearly, sometimes more. We have letters of attestation. Like, so to me, it's not necessarily as much of a, like, that legal issue is going to exist. You take a lot of it off your plate. And by the way, us as an MSSP, we follow far more strict guidelines. So again, it's probably a long-winded way of saying I'm not going to give you any legal guarantee, but I don't think we introduce a new legal issue. Those legal issues are you as the company. We just try to alleviate them.
Yep. Mitigate the best that we can.
Yeah.
All right. Next question we have in here. And by the way, keep the questions coming. This is the best way to keep us interactive.
Way more fun.
How does your program address the psychological aspects of cybersecurity fatigue and promote resilience among users to stay vigilant against emerging threats?
Great question. So your biggest weakness, I do, well, I don't know, what's like 9 layers below a TED Talk, a Bob Talk. I do a Bob Talk called Every Employee is a Firewall. And it's exactly about this. Like, I don't care how much money you spend, people you hire. This is your people are your biggest weakness or your biggest threat. And there isn't really an easy answer around specifically the cybersecurity fatigue. We fish internally.
Yeah.
Probably less than 10% of people report the fish, 10% click on it, 80 just delete it, right? Like, yeah. And that's probably realistic. Actually, a very interesting stat I saw one time, the majority of failed phishing attempts are actually like VP level and above in companies. It's not, there are trainings that we do. We work, KnowBe4 is a great partner.
I was going to say KnowBe4.
Yeah, there's others out there, but KnowBe4 is one that we partner with very closely. We report phishing button in your email security is important. That will come to our SOC. We will investigate it. I don't think there's necessarily a great answer to how do we alleviate the psychological fatigue. How do we train? How do we quarterly do a training, do a phishing exercise, use it as an example? I don't think it's about shaming. It used to be like, oh, you got caught. Now, I will admit, I had one. And I don't know if he's watching, Krista Brunner, who runs our security program. And I'd say I've probably been a mentor to him his whole career. But I text him at like 8 o'clock at night. I said, all right, Chris, I just clicked a link and it brought up a web page in all Chinese writing. Now, it wasn't phishing. It was a very legitimate, but what happened is the website, for whatever reason, was in Chinese. And when we translated, it was just a 404, not found. But my point is, I stay vigilant. I stay diligent. It was totally legit. And then that happened and I freaked out and we were all safe.
Although I will say, I was standing next to DeBrunner when he received your text about how you might have got phished, and he started laughing. It was hilarious.
Yeah, I'm sure he was laughing because he knows that I actually take it seriously.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but we do, as it relates to fatigue, and something we try to keep in mind. Like, we have a consulting CISO that goes out and works with our customers to help define their policies, help do reviews of their security program. Do you have training programs in place, a phishing policy in place that is reasonable for the employee to consume? Right. Because on the employee side, it is very easy to get fatigued on all of your security program changes and announcements and all those things. So we do, with our program, we do a really nice job of kind of balancing the reality of the security threats versus the adoption of the employee. I think that's one value that we add.
Yeah, and then the second part, and it's not the psychological, it's what we talked about earlier about the security and resiliency. Minimize your attack surface, expect that it's going to happen, be prepared. Yep. How do you isolate, what are the things that you can do to, what happens? This is where we get to Runbook. I've clicked a link. All right, get it off, the network, have things going through sandbox, DLP, detonate it. Like there's tools you can put in place to help your employee. Then there's runbooks you put in place, and how do you isolate it or minimize the impact? Least privilege access management, ZTNA. Those are tools, not necessarily answering how do you stop the fatigue part, but how do you minimize it when it happens, because it's going to happen.
Yeah. All right. So we have about 5 minutes left. So please, if you have any lasting questions, please put them in. But I do want to ask you, John, as we talk through cybersecurity fatigue, our MSSP is the answer. We talk through platformization. I guess, this is supposed to be a kind of general talk, but as an MSSP, like, who is who's the perfect client to adopt an MSSP? Because that's not a fit for everybody.
Yeah. So an MSSP also doesn't necessarily need to be a SOC. I mean, that's a really, really important piece of it.
Yeah.
And it probably should be. I also see some schools of thought of people going, I want multiple MSSPs, one doing this, one doing that, so my eggs aren't all in one basket. But who's the right client? To me, it's somebody who doesn't have the staff or the payroll or the appetite to continuously chase this. It is not a static environment. Yeah. And I think that's the bigger part of fatigue. It's not just OEMs coming in and saying, I've got a new tool, and so somebody buys it and now you have tool sprawl. It's the threat landscape continuing to evolve, and it's tools needing to continue to evolve. So to me, it's anybody that wants a self-advancing security program rather than a snapshot in time, right? You build, as soon as you build your security program and you put it in place, the next week you're behind, right? And that could be something as simple as patching. That doesn't just mean a new attack. It's how do you patch it? How many years ago that was Target?
10?
10?
12,
I mean,
yeah.
But that Target breach that we still talk about because it was kind of the first big one, that person, they said, was in the network for like 18 months. Now it's minutes, right? People are acting within minutes. So I think anybody that needs to constantly stay up to date and doesn't want to build it out themselves, that's where an MSSP comes in.
Yep. Okay, next question. I'll take a stab answering this quickly. How does your program integrate user education and awareness initiatives to mitigate cybersecurity fatigue and empower individuals to adopt proactive security practices in their daily routines? You mentioned this earlier, kind of the know before.
Yep.
We certainly have programs and partners that we have kind of in our Rolodex where we will introduce someone like a know before to the client to do proper education and awareness to help, keep employees vigilant.
Yeah, and the annual trainings and all of those things make it easy for them to report. So click the phishing button in Outlook to automatically report it, so you don't have to look up who it goes to. Physical security, I know we haven't even really gotten into today, but that's a huge issue. Again, it's more about mitigating. What are some of the tools like password lists? What are some of the identity-based things that Microsoft's already doing as part of the licensing you have for that employee? What's the training that you put in place? What are the tools when something happens? How are you able to respond? Yep. All of that. A lot of this security it used to be about securing a brick and mortar data center or building. Most of these tools are about securing the end user.
Yeah.
And I must say, to show how much we care about redundancy, we went ahead and asked that question to you twice, Justin. Sorry about that.
I think it's a little bit different.
I think it was worded. It was the same, sort of a question, but it was worded differently.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah. All good.
It's also very important.
Yeah, it's incredibly important. So, and no problem talking about it twice. Okay. A couple minutes left. So I'm going to kind of close this off here unless there's another question that pops up. Again, cybersecurity fatigue is a real thing. We feel it every day in our lives. Our customers certainly feel it. I think we're going to continue to see a rise in MSSPs as a way to alleviate some of that pain. And I think we're going to see a rise in platformization. We said in the last chat that we had earlier today is best of breed is kind of a dying concept. Platformization is a rising concept. Best of breed is still going to be important in certain arenas, so don't get me wrong. But I think both MSSPs, platformization is going to be where we're going to see the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, and I think what that will effectively do is make useless the OEM self-managed solutions. I know that was this is all about alleviating the stress, alleviating the headache, trying to stay up to date. Problem is you're buying point solutions and paying that OEM to manage that point solution. What platformization is going to do when you simplify those tools, so you take your 35 vendors and 70 tools down to 3 vendors and 20 tools, and then you have some tuck-ins, right? That you still want DDoS mitigation, you'll still want IAM or IAG and all of these things, right? So there's not a magic silver bullet, but these tools are starting to get condensed, and then you put an MSSP wrapper around it, and that's how you achieve the success.
Yeah, certainly. All right, well, everybody, thank you for your time. The clock shows we have 1 minute left, so we were right on the money today. And until next time, John, thank you so much. Lance, as always, great job, and we'll talk to you all soon.